Hello. Sorry for the delay there. We had a little technical glitch. My name's Ken Westin. I'm a solutions engineer here at LimaCharlie. Today, we're going to be covering a pretty fun topic, something I've been working on quite a while. Just kind of an interest of mine is with leveraging purple teaming for Okta. I think it's a really interesting data source to be looked at. One of the challenges with purple teaming with, Okta is that you really can't test some of the detections. It becomes kind of a challenge, especially if you want to try to do any sort of red teaming activity. You're not going to try to attack your production Okta instance, for example. So in this webinar, I'm going to talk a little bit about Okta and why you want to look at how you can protect it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can actually purple team detections, leveraging a combination of various free tools. One thing I do want to have a caveat here is that all of the things I'm going to show you here in some of the tools, you do not want to actually apply that to a production instance of Okta. Really want to stress that. I don't want anyone saying, hey, Ken told me that I could run this on production and have your Okta system go down. You're going to leverage a community, that's a developer edition of Okta. They actually offer a free account. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we get into some of the different tools that we're going to be using for the exercises. So just kind of a teaser here is we actually have a hands-on workshop that we're going to be doing in Texas. This is sort of a preview of it. And in the hands-on session, we're going to actually spend about 2 hours actually going through and leveraging these same tools. We're going to run various adversary emulation against Okta instances, look at the logs, and then we're going to write detections for it. Should be a lot of fun. So if you are in the Dallas area, I highly recommend that you sign up. There's that QR code there. And if you don't trust that, there's a little URL there for you to go to our events page where you can also register. And also we'll have a really great workshop as well with Matt Bromley. He'll be joining us as well to go into more of an advanced workshop on how to automate incident response. So I'm really looking forward to it. That's going to be a lot of fun. So the agenda here is I'm going to be walking through, kind of explaining sort of what identity security posture management is, why it's important. Talk a little bit about like some of the instances we actually had with some Okta breaches and why actually securing your Okta environment is pretty critical. Okta actually does a really great job of securing their infrastructure, especially after some of the incidents they've had. It wasn't always their fault. It was misconfigurations on the customer side. And there were also some challenges that they had. But they also did a lot of work to actually fix a lot of those issues. So I'd like to highlight some of that as well. And they actually have a lot more features as well available in the platform to actually help organizations ensure that their environment is much more secure. I'll talk a little bit about what purple teaming is. It's kind of a newer term. Some folks may not be familiar with it. We'll talk a little bit about data ingest, how we actually are going to go about actually getting data flowing from Okta into LimaCharlie. It's super easy. It takes less than 5 minutes. And then I'm going to show you how I leverage an open source adversary emulation tool to actually attack my developer instance to generate logs that I then go through and figure out how can I write detections, what should I be focused on. And for me, what I really like to do is actually run sort of real type of attack, look at the logs, and then identify what should I look for. And one really interesting thing about Okta is that it's always going to be different within every organization. I find it very difficult to actually write like detections that are going to work across every organization because they have different sort of processes. They have different sort of organizational structures as well. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about that and how I've written some of my detections. Okay, and let's get through it. So identity security posture management, sorry for the word salad here. This is more available for folks that are interested in the slides to give you a little bit more information. But it's essentially just providing visibility of identities across your organization. We hear a lot of things about like zero trust and things like that, and that really starts with identity, for example. We also want to be able to do risk assessments. What are the possible things that can go wrong in our environment? What's our current configuration? Getting list of users that have their MFA enabled or disabled constantly. There's a lot of ways you can actually automate a lot of those processes and reporting. And also ensuring that you have continuous monitoring. That's one thing I really like to have set up here. A lot of the detections I set up are actually pass-through detections, where the events that are generated from Okta, I basically just pass it through because it has all the context I need. And if you want to, you can add additional enrichments and things like that to your detections as needed, incorporate additional threat intelligence and things like that as well. And then also cloud identity management as well. So thinking about not just identities that maybe in your traditional network, but also how does that translate into your cloud environments and keeping track of that as well. So what is the worst that can possibly happen? I'm sure that you folks have all seen in the news a lot of the breaches, some pretty significant ones that have impacted Okta. It's been in the headlines quite a bit, and it makes sense because Okta is a service that's utilized by a majority of the companies that are out there. A lot of the enterprise and the top companies are leveraging it. So it makes sense that it would become a hot target for attackers. And particularly when you're looking at if you can gain access to it, you can potentially get access to the keys to the kingdom very easily. So one particular group was Lapsus. We always talk about APT groups with nation state actors. A lot of folks thought this Lapsus group was this because they thought there's no way that an individual or a small group of hackers could actually cause the damage that they actually did. And I refer to them as advanced persistent teenagers because they did turn out to be a group of young kids, really brilliant, but also very persistent. It can also be pesky, I guess, because they were a little annoying. But some of their techniques that they were leveraging was a lot of supply chain attacks. I think that's kind of an important thing to think about is a lot of times the attack may not come directly from in that environment or an employee. It could be a contractor or someone else that we've given access to some of our applications. And these folks, they do the reconnaissance, they do the research, they identify who's doing business with who, and they're able to leverage that before they actually conduct their attacks. We also look at the reconnaissance and the initial access. A lot of social engineering was taking place in this. A lot of phishing emails. That we had also situations where they were trying to buy access from initial access brokers and underground markets. We saw a lot of MFA hijacking. They even were offering money for insider recruitment of folks in telecoms, up to $20,000, I think, per week for to do some of their dirty work for SIM swapping and things like that. They also leverage privilege escalation, lateral movement. So there's a lot of different methods and techniques that they're actually leveraging. If you look at MITRE ATT&CK, the Lapsus group actually has kind of their own sort of spreadsheet as well of all of the different techniques that they leverage. I highly recommend taking a look at that. I reference that quite a bit to sort of look at, when I simulate these attacks, maybe I can even tag some of these detections with some of those MITRE techniques. So after Okta had a lot of these compromises and these issues, they actually, there was quite a few of them over the last few years. I'm not going to go through and explain all of these, but there is a history here, right? So odds are that these sorts of attacks are going to continue to happen in the future. One thing I can say is that Okta did bolster their security. Again, I know word salad, I'm not going to go through every one of these, but these are steps that Okta has actually taken to help improve the security of their overall the posture of their platform, providing additional tools as well for their customers to also better protect their environments. So what is purple teaming? I think a lot of folks have heard of what red teaming is. All right, that's more on the offensive side. So dealing with a penetration test, for example. You also may have a vulnerability assessment, some social engineering, like phishing, scam tests, things like that. And then on the defensive side, that's where we have our security controls. Maybe our detection engineers are operating there, and incident response. So one of the challenges with this, when you have red teaming, it's usually an engagement. Maybe there's a pen test, but oftentimes there's a lag in when you're actually able to get a report. And it can be weeks, it can be months. And sometimes the information you get isn't going to be necessarily actionable, particularly if you're working on some of the detections and things like that. So with purple teaming, there is a bit more of collaboration, right? So the idea here is you can leverage tools like adversary emulation, or you can even run attacks against infrastructure that you have set up in a test or dev environment to generate those logs to see what would an attack really look like. I really like to do this. I did a lot of work with ransomware, for example. So I actually wanted to set up an environment where it actually runs sort of, as close to a real as possible, an attack against that infrastructure to then look at those logs, think about how I can write better detections to detect some of those particular incidents. And so it's the same thing with Okta as well. And just to be kind of candid, I mean, really what it is what I refer to as FAFO, or fool around and find out. It's really just sort of tinkering and seeing what you find. And when I was testing some of these tools, like adversary emulation tools against Okta, it was really interesting because, when I logged in, I saw that what logs it was generating, like to go to an admin page. If you're an admin, you get redirected to an admin page, and that actually generates an event. And that's something you can actually write a detection for. So if, for example, I'm the Okta administrator in my organization, and only I am allowed to like create new API keys, for example, I can write a detection specifically for that. If anyone that's not me writes that detection, then I want to trigger an alert and increase maybe the severity of that alert quite a bit. So there's a lot of really great things that can come out of leveraging some of these tools. A lot of times when I'm looking at a data source, I have no idea what to look for. Some of them don't have very good documentation. So actually running these sort of simulated attacks or events to generate those logs is a really great way to get started. I stole this from SANS. I really like this when they approached the purple teaming. A lot of what we're going to be doing in our exercise in a few weeks is more around the bottom side, where we're actually doing collection, we're processing that data. A lot of that happens automatically within the LimaCharlie platform, which is great. And then we start to write some of those detections that we then share with the larger team. And then based on our feedback from that, then we sort of reiterate. And it's like a very continuous process. And it's important to pay attention to Okta updates as well, because they change and add additional log events and things like that over time. So it's important to pay attention to that. So all of the tools that you can leverage for this, I try to stick to free or open source tools as much as possible. The nice thing about the LimaCharlie is we offer a community edition that is free. So this is something that you can set up in your home labs, and I highly recommend it. This is how I got hooked on LimaCharlie. I started with the home lab, and now I work here. So it's pretty awesome. There's also Okta. They offer a free developer account. Again, do not run some of these tools against a production instance of Okta. I really want to stress that. And they offer this free developer account. You have API access. The only thing you're sort of throttled by is sort of the number of events and things like that. But most of the time, it's going to suffice for your testing purposes. And then there's an open source tool that I leverage pretty heavily that we'll talk a little bit more about in a couple of slides. It's called Dorothy, and it's an adversary emulation tool specifically for Okta and testing Okta detections. So when we look at LimaCharlie, the platform, if you're new to it, a lot of times folks are used to thinking about security tooling as sort of these individual silos. Maybe you go out and you go to Black Hat or you go to RSA and you buy the best of breed of an EDR tool, right? Like maybe a legacy tool like a CrowdStrike or a SentinelOne, for example. Then you may also incorporate a SIEM, where you maybe go out and buy Splunk or Elastic. Then you try to get those tools to talk to each other. Then you're maybe bringing in a cloud security tool because you want to be able to monitor the cloud as well. And then you try to tie it all together, maybe with a SOAR platform. And then you also have incident response, and that's going to be maybe even a separate team that has a whole nother set of tools like Velociraptor, and they may even have different services as well. This could also be an external entity. But the thing is like we kind of think about this as these individual silos. And so with LimaCharlie, what we do is we try to break down those silos, and we provide one security platform to rule them all. We can augment existing tools, whether it's an existing EDR solution, or if you're trying to wean yourself off of some of those tools to save money. Highly recommend taking a look at LimaCharlie to be able to do that. Or if you need more capabilities, particularly around incident response, that's something a lot of folks will come to us for. We actually work well with some of those other EDR tools, so no issues there. Like Defender, for example, it's great. We work really great with that tool. And we also can fulfill a lot of SIEM use cases. A lot of folks consider us maybe just like they think of us for EDR only. However, we also can bring in logs from pretty much any log source that you can imagine. If it generates logs, we're going to be able to ingest it. And we also store those logs for a full year. And that's kind of a big differentiator in the marketplace. Usually with other SIEMs, you're lucky if you get 90 days, and even then it's quite expensive. But also incorporating cloud security, like all these other log sources as well, like Okta we're going to be talking about today. It's really helpful to be able to bring that in. And then, of course, we are truly multi-tenant, and everything that I even show you in the UI is something you can also do through our API as well. So highly recommend taking a look at that. And so we also are going to integrate with our Okta developer account. It's super easy to add this. It's really just you fill out 3 fields. This takes less than 5 minutes. You simply go into the Okta, you log into the Okta admin screen, go to security, go to API, generate a new token, and boom, there you go. You put that into your LimaCharlie instance, and that data is now flowing into that environment. And so then we also are going to leverage Dorothy. So Dorothy, again, is an adversary emulation tool specifically for Okta. Now, it doesn't run any sort of exploits or anything like that. You actually do have to give it an API token. So I usually generate a second token. I have one for my LimaCharlie instance, and then I have another one that's for the evil hacker. The idea here is that it simulates a situation where maybe someone gets into your Okta infrastructure and generates a new API token, or maybe they compromise it. They found it on GitHub or somewhere else that maybe a developer left it. But you have the developer key, and then what you're able to do is have access to a really great menu. So sorry if you can't see that very well, but there's a lot of different modules. If you've ever leveraged anything like Metasploit, you should be very kind of familiar with this type of a menu and how to navigate it. What's great is they align these different modules with the different MITRE tactics, which is really helpful. So there's a menu around discovery. There's another menu around persistence, another one around defense. And what's really interesting, actually, for if you're a red teamer or a pen tester, when you're using this tool, one thing I did find is if I run just searches, like if I identify like a who am I, that kind of gives me the idea of what the permissions are of that the user that I have on that token. Or if I list a list of users, or I query for a list of users that don't have MFA enabled, those do not generate logs. So you can actually do reconnaissance against Okta infrastructure without triggering any sort of alerts with an API token. There is one that when you generate an API token, but if you have that token and you just are doing searches to figure out information about policies, about users, who has MFA, who doesn't, those do not generate logs. So they do generate logs when you start to create users and you actually take action. And that's what we're going to show you actually in our environment in just a little bit. So I actually ran sort of an attack sequence. I'm not going to have you folks watch me type all these different commands in the terminal. It's like watching paint dry. But if you are interested in actually getting hands-on with this, again, we have our workshop that we're going to be running in Dallas. And if you're an MSSP or a company that wanted us to run this for you, we'd be happy to do that for you, run it like a private workshop. Just reach out to me. My email address was at the beginning of the slide, and I'll also let you guys see it again at the end. So if you are interested in doing that, let me know. Happy to do that. And so my attack scenario is pretty simple. I steal an API token. I identify who am I to see what permissions I have, and I identify that I'm actually a super user. I then dump all the users that are in the environment, get a list of them. I then create a new user. I then escalate that user's privileges to a super administrator. The idea here is to establish persistence. So, for example, maybe they identify that, hey, someone stole a token. We need to reset that person's password, kick them out. I still have another account with admin access that I can get into. I can generate another API token from that as well. Therefore, I establish my persistence. And then I can also disable MFA on a particular user account. It's kind of interesting. There's actually a search in Dorothy that'll actually identify any users that don't have MFA. So that's helpful. And then I can also set password questions. So security questions, I can also set that if it's not set in the environment, which is also another kind of neat thing if you're doing any sort of red teaming activity around this. So now I'm going to kind of jump actually. So I already ran that attack. So I'm going to switch over here just a minute. All right, so you should see my environment. So with LimaCharlie, the way we approach a lot of our telemetry gathering is we think of anything that sends data as a sensor. Now that takes a lot of different forms. That can be both an endpoint as well as a log source. And so kind of running out of time here. So I was going to show you some of the atomic red team stuff we have for the endpoint, which is great for purple teaming when you have adversary emulation. But I'm going to jump into my actual Okta instance here. There we go. So if I go into my sensor here, you'll see that I can actually go directly into my timeline. Now, this is where I'm able to see all of the logs of what I've actually kind of generated in all these different attacks. So it's really helpful. These are highlighted. And again, these can be primarily like pass-through detections. If you want to, you can maybe add different severities and things like that. But as we kind of go through here, this one's really interesting is there's this thing where if I'm an administrator, when I log into Okta, it doesn't indicate like when there's a failed login that I'm an administrator. However, if I am an administrator, it will actually redirect me to this particular admin page. So that means hey, there has been an admin login. So you can actually very easily create a detection based on this. So you can see in the log file, we can see that the identity of the user that logged in. Now, if there was another email address that maybe someone that's not an authorized administrator, I can trigger an alert based on that. So it's really nice to be able to kind of go through here very easily and identify this. And so if I want to, I can very quickly write a DNR rule based on this. And this is where it'll just plop it in here. I could modify this as much as I want to. I have a few that I have created already. So there's this one around API token created. Again, all I do here is I'm just looking for if there is an API token that's been created, I want to then report it. I pass the host name, the instance of my Okta, and then the person that actually was involved in that particular activity. This one I think is really interesting too. I started looking at disabling MFA for a particular user, so I can write a detection for that. And this is where I'm actually looking for, again, the name of the person and as well as the host name that's passed through it. I can also look to see if a user gets created. That may not be something critical, but I can also create another alert that if that user gets created and then they're escalated to an admin, increase the severity. And that's really kind of a great way to approach some of our detection logic. So, and that's pretty much how we're going to be able to very easily, again, leverage sort of adversary emulation tools to generate those logs that we then can write detections. And those can be path-through detections, or again, we can add additional context. One thing I really like to do is if someone is creating a token, for example, maybe I only want that person to be me, who is the admin. If anyone else does that, I want to be able to trigger an alert. Hey, like Joe Smith, who was a regular user, he just created an admin token. He shouldn't have those permissions, and then you can generate an alert based on that. So let me get back into my slides. So that's it for the presentation side. So if you guys can, you can probably see that. Yeah, my email is just ken@limacharlie.com. So if you want a copy of my slides, feel free to reach out to me. I'll send you it in a PDF. And also, I have up here on the screen our workshop that we're going to be doing in Dallas. Again, if you want to get hands-on with this, one thing I really want to do is actually kind of show folks how to run these different tools and then look at the logs. And then I'm hoping that folks can experiment with it and we can write some really kind of innovative detections sort of at the end of it. So I'm really looking forward to that. So if you are in the Dallas area, hopefully you can reach out. If you are interested in maybe running a private workshop or talking to us how you can leverage Okta and the LimaCharlie platform, please feel free to reach out to us. And that's it for our webinar today. I want to thank you for spending the half hour with us today, and I hope to see you all back here for another webinar in the future. Thank you so much.